Hi there, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today I'll be going over the Fujifilm X-S10 and we're going to go ahead and review the 35mm f2 lens. Let's get started. The Fujifilm X-S10 is a 26 megapixel crop sensor mirrorless camera that has 425 focus points, a fully articulating touch LCD screen, and has a continuous drive of 20 frames per second. It also has 4K video up to 30 frames, a microphone port through a USB-C converter, in-body stabilization up to 6 stops with specific lenses, and wireless built-in for transferring photos and video to your smart device. This camera weighs just over a pound with a comfortable deep grip and a simple, easy-to-learn overlay. Today we will be discussing the doors, buttons, and menus to help you navigate this camera a bit easier. So just to go over the lens first, this is the 35mm f2. This is the XF lens, not the XC. This lens does not come with the XS10, just so you guys know, but because I have done videos with other Fujis and their kit lenses previously, I thought that maybe I would try a new Fuji lens and review it for you guys. So the 35 XF lens has weather resistance. It has the aperture ring here that allows you to go from f2 all the way to f16 or setting it to auto. It has the focus ring here. I have a filter on it to keep the glass protected. Along with how fast its autofocus is, which was incredibly impressive, it's also absolutely silent, which is perfect for video. Not to mention, look at that size. It's nice and small, perfect prime for walking around. I would say this is an ideal like street lens, something if you like say you were going into the city and you want to, you know, take pictures of the city on vacation or on a day trip. The 35 is perfect for this camera. So I'd definitely say it's worth the, like, I think $400 that it is to get this lens. It's rather inexpensive in comparison to a lot of the Fuji high-end lenses, but it's definitely worth it. I would say the 35XF is definitely a huge thumbs up for me. Now we'll go ahead and go over the walkthrough of this camera. So as you can see on the front, it doesn't have very many buttons here. It has a nice deep grip, which a lot of complaints that are related to Fuji on their past models have been that the grip hasn't been very comfortable or big enough to feel like it's stable in their hands. This definitely feels very comfortable, even for me who has small hands. We do have one button here, which is going to be for removing the lens. So if you just hold that button down, there we go. It's going to reveal the sensor. Now, when you change your lens, you always want to make sure that the camera's face down or in a controlled environment where there's no dust or debris that may fly onto the sensor there, where you'll get spots. You just line up the red dot with the red dot here, turn and click, and you are ready to rock and roll. You will see as I go over this camera, it has a very simple overlay. It's very similar to the XT30, which I also did a walkthrough of a while back. But of course, this is a new model. This is going to have in-body stabilization and a couple other options here, like it does have a mic port option, which we will discuss as well. On this side of the camera, as you can see, there is nothing going on there, no details. Well, on this side of the camera, this is where we're going to find our speaker for playing back audio. We do have a door here, which is going to house our HDMI port for connecting it to an external screen. It'll also be for connecting it to like your television set if you wanted to do a slideshow of pictures for a group of people. You have the USB-C cable. It is going to be for charging the battery while you're on the go. It's also going to be for transferring your pictures as well. On the bottom of the camera here, you can see that we have our universal tripod mount that'll allow you to mount it to any tripod. And we have our door here, which houses our battery and SD card slot, which of course is going to be spring loaded. So the battery has a lever here, which will have the spring pop the battery up. And for the SD card, you always want to push down before you pull out that card there as well. You never want to pry it out or else you will damage that mechanism side. On the top of the camera here, you can see we have our on and off switch. That's going to be around our shutter button. So if you push your shutter button halfway down to focus, you push all the way down to take a picture. The red dot here is going to be recording video. So you push this once to start recording, push it again to stop recording. We have one of our adjustment dials here, as well as here and here, if we want to adjust different things depending on the mode that we're in, which we'll go over here in a moment. We have our flash, our pop-up flash option here. So if you just hit this lever, it's going to pop up that flash for you. If you don't need it, you just put it back down. We have our hot shoe here, which is going to house an external flash if you want the control to bounce or diffuse your flash rather than having kind of just a set beam straight at your subject. We have our mode dial here, which is going to control, you know, the ability of settings that you can change and why and the reason of changing them. So on automatic, that's really going to be for when you first get this camera, maybe you don't know your shutter speeds and apertures very well, you just want to get comfortable with this camera. Auto is going to give the camera full control over whatever you need to do. Your next step is going to be your P mode. This is program. This is going to allow the camera to work with you. So you can change either your shutter speed or aperture. You can change things like your ISO, where to focus, how to focus, all these different things. While the camera kind of changes everything else to still get you an accurate photo when it comes to lighting. The S mode is going to be your shutter priority. This is going to be controlling speed if you would like to show or stop motion in your pictures. Your A mode is your aperture. This has to do with this aperture ring here. So F2 is going to be wide open when it comes to the opening in the lens, letting more light in and getting that nice blurred background effect, versus closing it down to F16 is closing that opening in the lens, letting less light in but more sharpness throughout. And you can also achieve that nice starburst effect when it comes to the sun coming through the trees or Christmas lights or something like that, all in that mode, while the camera figures out the shutter speed. Now, if you want to learn more about your aperture mode, shutter speed mode, program mode, I do have videos on those in my camera basics playlist, so please take a look at that. I have manual mode here. This is where you are going to control everything and anything. So the camera is only doing what you tell it to. Now, me personally, I don't use manual 100% of the time. You don't have to use manual 100% of the time. And don't let anyone tell you any different. That's why there's all these different modes on the camera to use, is because a lot of these help with different situations. If you're taking pictures of a portrait and you know you want that blurry background, you know, you put it on aperture, you open it up. If you know for a fact that you're taking pictures of someone doing, oh, I don't know, track or some other sport, and your goal is to freeze them in motion, you put it in your shutter speed and adjust how quick you need it to do. And the camera figures out how much light you need. You know, so these modes here are going to be able to help you learn those settings more. Now, manual is going to come in handy, especially if you're in a controlled lighting situation, something like that. But don't jump right into manual because you will get easily overwhelmed. And if you're the type of person that just jumps right in and you don't get overwhelmed and you just kind of put yourself through it to learn, you know, the hardest way to kind of help break it down, that's perfect. But my overall recommendation is stay away from manual until you fully understand how to use shutter speed, how to use aperture, how to use ISO, your 3 interrelated variables, and your camera. We have custom modes, C1, C2, C3, and C4. These are all going to be settings that you can save directly to your custom mode. This could be for dynamic range, could be for black and white, could be for video, could be for a studio setting, something where you have the same setup every week, like I do, same lighting, where you know that each time is going to be the same and you find the perfect settings to use. You just dial into your custom mode and make that kind of your studio mode, if you will. The little video cameras are video mode. Now, you don't have to be in your video mode in order to record video with this red button like we were going over before. You can be in your auto mode, P mode, S mode, A mode, M mode, whatever it is, and still record video. This just kind of helps shorten up your menu and that type of thing to make it more video direct. Here we have filters, so let's go ahead and see our options on those. We do have a articulating screen here, which is pretty excellent. So in regards to filters, let's take a look here. So filters you would change with this knob here. So you have toy camera, miniature, pop culture, high key, low key, dynamic tone, soft focus. You have partial colors like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. So if you wanted to pick out certain colors, you could do that. So for example, if I say pick my book here that I got from my husband. Say I want to focus in on my book here and I want to pick out different colors. So there really aren't any purples there. So let's try blue. Well, the general book is blue. So it's picking up all those and making the camera and the flowers black and white. Versus green. Okay, not too much green there. There is supposed to be green in these leaves here, but it doesn't seem to be picking those up, so it must need a stronger green because it's more of a pastel. We have yellow, so it's definitely picking up some yellow tones here. It's picking up more yellow than it is green. And we have orange, definitely picking up some orange tones in the picture in the illustration here around the flowers. It's also picking up the oranges in my skin tone. Let's see, and then we have red as well, which is also picking out some outlines. So it's kind of a neat thing. Typically you want to try it on things that have more of a bold color than a pastel color like that. So it picks out those colors nice and strong rather than an outline. But just so you guys can see a sample. Now you may notice right now, if I pass my hand underneath, the back of the screen looks really laggy, right? That's going to be kind of like a power save mode, if you will. But it'll kick right back into full motion mode when you tap the shutter button saying, hey, wake up, I'm still here, I'm still taking pictures. So it's just to help you reserve battery life. Now if we look into SP, this is going to be your film simulations, if you will. So you have automatic, you have sepia, monochrome, acros, you have all sorts of different Fuji films that you could play with if you've played with these before. They do a fairly great job at replicating these. Does different color tones, some bring out blues and greens better, some have different tones for black and white, that type of thing. All that's going to be in your SP mode on your dial. And for the rest of the walkthrough, we're gonna just be in the P mode, just so you know when we go through the menu, it's gonna show you all the options. Then we have two buttons right up here. We have the ISO button, which is going to allow us to change our ISO options. It gives you 3 preset auto modes, which I love. What I like to do is I like to set my ISO on auto and give it a limit. Auto 2 is already set between 160 and 3200, which I think is pretty perfect for general everyday shooting. We have the Q button here, which is going to be our quick menu. So we have our shooting mode. We have our focus mode, which AFS is going to be for autofocus single, so it locks on to a still subject. If we wanted to change that setting in the box, we just use this adjustment dial here. AFC is autofocus continuous, so it continually focuses as the subject moves. MF is manual focus, so you manually focus with that manual focus ring on the lens. And then we're back to AFS. Your autofocus mode, otherwise, is your autofocus area, so kind of the space that you're using. So you have autofocus all, which is using the entire screen, more of a general specific area, a more specific point, and a more specific spot. The more you go, the more specific you can be with your focus point, from someone's head to a portrait shoot to someone's eyelash. It's pretty incredible. And we have dynamic range, which you can change. You have high ISO noise reduction. I like to turn that off. That way I can have more control of that in Lightroom. Not to mention, it'll allow me to get to my next long exposure sooner. We have image size, which is only changeable through having it set to JPEG, right? I like to capture these images in RAW so I can really show you what this camera is capable of, but you can take pictures in JPEG and RAW. There's the film simulation again, otherwise you can go into the SP mode. Your self timer, if you'd like to set that. Face and eye detection, if you are taking pictures of a lot of people. Your flash function settings. And you have your LCD brightness as well. And you should be able to change any of these options. So say you're like, okay, I might change my LCD brightness one time and I'll probably never change it again. You can change your quick menu settings in your menu, which we will go over last. And that actually brings us to the back of the camera here. So if you want to get out of this quick menu or any other menu or settings that you're in, just push your shutter button halfway down and it'll get you right back into shooting mode, just so you guys have that little tidbit there. So if we start with this button up at the top here, this is going to be our drive mode. So the one camera is going to be a still image. When you click and hold your shutter button, it's going to take one picture. You have your continuous high speed burst, which is going to go up to 20 frames per second. You have your low speed burst, which is going to go slower than that, and you can change that. ISO bracketing, white balance bracketing, auto exposure bracketing. You have HDR, you have panoramic. You also have multiple exposure, which is a lot of fun to play with, but it does take a lot of practice. You'll also see that there's a little trash can next to this. So when we're playing back here, you can see that I accidentally started a video earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this button to access the trash can on our playback menu here, where we can delete this specific frame, selected frames to do multiple or all the pictures. So we're just going to do this frame here. We're going to hit OK. Great. Then our card is empty. And I'm going to hit that shutter button again to get us back to the shooting mode. We have our auto exposure lock for when we want to lock in our lighting in a specific spot. And also this is our viewfinder here. So got a little fuzz there. When you put your face up to your viewfinder, it'll turn this little guy on and turn the screen off, or vice versa. This button here is going to allow you to change different things for your viewfinder, like your white balance and lighting. And then this is your diopter here, which is going to allow you to make this so it's in focus for your eyes. If you have glasses, which I don't, your adjustment would be different from mine. So that is what this is for here. And we have our joystick here, which if you just move it on the shooting mode, you can move your focus point around, which is great. You can also use the touch screen, which is pretty excellent. And we have our menu or OK button, which we'll go over last, and then our display or back button. So if you're in your menu and you want to go back, you just hit this. When you're in your shooting screen, it'll actually change how your screen is displayed. So depending on what your preference is, I personally like this one here. It's my personal preference because it gives you the battery level, your ISO, your f-stop, your shutter speed, what mode you're on, what focusing mode. It gives you how many pictures you have left. So shooting in RAW, I have 529 pictures. Or on video for HD at 60 frames, I have 38 minutes of video left on this. And it's going to tell me if I have my stabilization on or off, because I use this on a tripod. You always want to make sure that stabilization is off. We're going to go ahead and go into the menu now. Starting up at the top menu, the IQ menu, this is the image quality settings. So of course, you'll find that a lot of these are going to be very similar to what you can find on your quick menu or other parts on the camera. So I might skip a little bit, or I might skip something because there's not really an important sense of knowing what it does, at least right away. But if you guys have any questions about certain things on the menu that I didn't go over enough detail or at all, please let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer any questions. So in the IQ menu here, image quality, that's JPEG, RAW, or RAW and JPEG. Your RAW recording, I like to shoot uncompressed. Film simulation, your grain effect, color chrome effect, so just general visuals, white balance, dynamic range, you have your tone curve, color, sharpness. All this can be changed in camera, so you can kind of tinker with things so you don't have to edit. Long exposure noise reduction, we went over that. Lens modulation optimizer. You have color space, always keep an sRGB, pixel mapping, edit save custom settings, which is going to be like the custom settings on your mode dial. You have mount adapter settings, so if you have an adapter that you're using with this camera for other lenses, maybe film lenses that you have laying around. The next tab is going to be our autofocus manual focus settings. So you have your area, your mode that we went over in your quick menu. We have the autofocus continuous custom settings, store autofocus mode by orientation. I think, vertical or horizontal, which is interesting. Autofocus point display, number of focus points. I am using the whole 425 that there are. Pre-autofocus. You have autofocus illuminator, which is going to be this LED light right up on the front. That will, if turned on, will shine out and help you focus on something if it feels that there's a lack of detail or a lack of light. You have face eye detection settings, autofocus and manual focus assist, focus checking, interlocking spot auto exposure, and focus area. So that way you can lock in where you're taking your exposure from and your autofocus. Otherwise you can turn that off. Instant autofocus settings, depth of field scale, release or focus priority if you'd like it to take the picture whether it's in focus or not, or if you want to focus absolutely before it takes the picture no matter what, you have to choose that. Autofocus range limiter, touch screen mode, and then we're into our shooting settings, just general camera photography settings. You have your scene position, the filter settings, sport finder mode, you have your pre-shot, self-timer, save self-timer settings if you have a custom that you would like to use. Self-timer lamp is going to be for when you do have it going with the self-timer. That light in the front that we talked about for autofocus assist will blink to allow you to see the countdown of the timer before it takes the picture. Interval timer shooting, you have auto exposure bracketing settings, film simulation bracketing, a lot of bracketing options here. You have photometry, which I hope is the way that you say it. It's essentially your photometer, which allows you to meter for a specific light, which is what photography is all about. It's finding the correct balance of light. I like to have it on spot, very specific, so I can use my auto exposure lock button to lock in where I would like to take my light from. You have your shutter type. You can do manual shutter or electronic. You have flicker reduction, image stabilizer mode, which again, if you're on a tripod, you want to make sure that's set to off. We have your ISO settings. Again, you have that button on the top there, and also your wireless communication. Here we have our flash settings, flash function, red eye removal, through the lens lock mode. Then we have our video tab, which is going to be very similar to our photo tab, just more geared toward video. So you have your movie mode if you would like to shoot in 4K versus HD. 4K you can shoot up to 30 frames on this camera, HD is up to 60. You have your file format, full HD high speed recording, image stabilizer modes, your audio settings, and then we have our setup options here, so our setup tab. So we'll start with user setting. First option here is formatting. This has to do with our card. I like to go over this on every walkthrough just so everyone is educated on this. Now, formatting is going to permanently erase all data, all visual images off of your card. It allows it to start fresh as a brand new card, just like you purchased the first time. Now, the reason you would want to do this rather than just using the trash can button to delete all your pictures to start over is because the trash can button just deletes the visible data, not the actual data of your pictures. It just allows it to be overwritten, and once you overwrite it over and over and over again, you can have corruption or locked up card later on. And to avoid that, it's always just good to format your card after you have gone and made sure your pictures are backed up to a external hard drive, iCloud service, whatever it may be. You just want to be sure that the photos are backed up before you decide to format your card. And this is in a case where you may reuse your cards. If you're someone that goes to buy a new card every trip you go on, then you don't have to worry about this. But just so you are aware how important formatting is. You have date and time, time difference, language, your My Menu settings, which is going to be the grayed out My underneath the wrench. If we go back here, as you can see that, there's a little grayed out My. That's going to be your My Menu tab. What that allows you to do is it allows you to go through all of these tabs and all the settings we just went through. And instead of having to dig for one of those if you needed to get to it, and it's not on the outside of your camera, you can designate it to your My Menu tab so you know exactly where it is every time, which is really handy. You have sensor cleaning, which is really just going to kind of shake the sensor, see if it knocks any dust off. But if you do get spots on your sensor, I do recommend having it professionally cleaned. I don't recommend cleaning it yourself. You have sound and flash, resetting your settings. So say you were out with your camera and all of a sudden your camera is doing something funny. You pressed a button, you did something, you're like, I don't even know what I did. If no one can help answer your question about what's going on and how to fix it quickly, just go into your menu and reset your settings. It'll reset them to factory settings, and your camera should ideally start working again. Then we have our sound settings, so your autofocus beep level, self-timer beep level, operation, your shutter volume, because you can make this completely silent. It is a mirrorless camera. Your shutter sound, you can choose what sound it makes when you take a picture. And your playback volume as well. Screen settings, so view mode settings. EVF is electronic viewfinder, that's this guy here. And of course LCD is the LCD screen, so you can adjust color adjustment, and brightness. Image display. You have auto rotate displays if you'd like it to auto rotate the picture if you've taken it vertically or horizontally. A natural live view. Framing guidelines if you need help composing your image, using that rule of thirds. Maybe making sure your image is nice and straight across. Perfect. Focus scale units. We have display custom settings. We have large indicator mode on both the electronic viewfinder and LCD. We have our quick menu, so the Q button that we went over, that you can change both for your photo taking and your video. If you want to change the background of those, if you want them to be transparent or solid. And then we have our button and dial settings, so the focus lever settings, editing, saving your quick menu if you would like to change those. You have your function settings, your shutter autofocus, shutter auto exposure, shooting without a lens, so if you have this connected to, say, a telescope, something like that. Shooting without a card, I like to have that off because sometimes I forget to have a card. I like for the camera to remind me and not just act like it has a card in it. Focus ring, which direction you would like to turn it to be able to focus. Focus ring operation, auto exposure, autofocus lock mode, auto white balance lock mode, touchscreen settings. Then we have your power management. This will auto power off after a set amount of time. It's set to 2 minutes currently. Performance, boost settings. You have your save data settings. I would keep the frame number on continuous personally. That's probably going to be the better option. That way you're not running into, oh, you have the same file number here, and it's, don't worry about it. You have save original image. I would have that on when you're playing with like the filter or something like that, so it saves the add original image. Editing the file name, selecting a folder, copyright info, your connection settings, so connecting it to, say, the application on your phone to transfer pictures and video, connecting it to an Instax printer to print pictures on the Instax printer paper, which is awesome. Connection mode, general settings, information, and then you're back to user settings. And then as you can see here, when we go back, you'll see that the My menu down there is grayed out because I never started a My menu on this camera before doing a walkthrough. So if you wanted to start a My menu tab so you don't have to dig through all of these, you can do that right here in user settings. Other than that, that pretty much sums up the XS10. I think it's pretty excellent. I love the articulating screen. I love that it still has that very classy look, even if it doesn't have the shutter speed dial and the ISO dial, but you still have that nice aperture dial, which is what I like to use anyway. So if you guys have any questions about either the 35XF or the Fujifilm X-S10, please let me know in the comments below and I'll be happy to get to those. If there are other lenses you would like me to take pictures with to show you either how they do, or maybe a comparison, or another camera that you would like me to do a review of, please let me know. I'll be happy to get to those and add those to my list for you. And until next time, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.